Welcome to Novel. Today I'm joined by a man who started his career in the industrial materials sector, spending 30 years working in R&D teams and building R&D teams and successfully innovating across one of the UK's foundational industries, with experience in Europe and the US. For the last few years, he's made the break with the corporate world and he's joined the startup scene as a non-executive director, mentor, investor, angel, working with some of the UK's brightest young deep tech startups to help them become successful. Richard, welcome to Novel.
Thank you, Andrew.
Where did it all begin? So you're an industrial chemist by background?
Material scientist
Okay.
by background. Came from a small village in Mayo, in County Mayo called Ballintubber. Born there, grew up there, did my leaving cert in Ireland, and had an interest very young as a kind of fixer, mechanical engineering. Growing up in a farm, you have to be all hands to all men, and I kind of loved taking things apart and had an interest in science from a young age, an interest in how things worked. So when the opportunity arose after my leaving cert to look at opportunities, I went to the Midlands Technical College at Lone Regional Technical College at the time, and did my my degree in polymer science and polymer engineering. Subsequently, then moved to London and continued that work in London. Continued my education in London, in now North London University. And got a job, first job with a PLC business in Norfolk as a project leader, and really migrated there then to, after 18 months, we were told we were going to relocate. That was my first big change, I suppose, in management, and an interesting scenario because I think at a young age, maybe in my early 20s, it's quite a shock in the early 90s to kind of think, well, okay, we were living in the middle of the Thatcher era. There was a lot of change in the UK. There was a lot of new businesses starting, and we were in the middle of an acquisition and takeover, and that was my first experience of takeovers and acquisitions during that period.
Well, in your early 20s.
Yes, yeah, and it was interesting. So it helped me establish my early career. I went on to build out a factory in Wales with that company, build a team, my own team, my first team, became a manager. And very soon we established that as a very nice filtration business, working in all sorts of areas, including vacuum cleaners. You may remember the Dyson technology. We had an equivalent technology working with Hoover at the time. And we also worked in photographic activity. We worked in the automotive sector. And it was the industrial sector that really got me excited. So I was headhunted then by another PLC at the time in Lancashire, a very famous Northwest company back then called Scapa. And I moved to them in the mid-90s. And
Scappa's still a big name, aren't they?
Scapa is still a big name. It was back then, and it still is. It's now moved into medical and tapes business.
Yeah.
You may recall, and it's now been taken
Adhesives
over.
and antimicrobial.
That's correct. Yeah. But back then we were developing a filtration business, and I built a team in Lancashire. Built it out from I suppose an embryonic what was a textile business into a filtration business, and helped to migrate that business. And we had divisional teams around the world. We had also distributors. And under good leadership and management, I soon discovered that maybe you needed also a very good team structure, and you needed good organization in businesses to help them build them out and develop them. So we, under a very good leader at the time, we started to build that out. We started to acquire our distributors and our network, and started to build that company into something more substantial. But change is always around the corner, and soon that company was taken over by a larger group company. The main part of that business was a paper business, and we were then subsequently put up for sale, put out on the market. And that was my first example in 1999 of private equity, what private equity was. So private equity came in helped us to grow the business. That was Duke Street Capital. They took over the business with us, and we, the management team, bought into the business. And still very young, but each of us was given a small stake in the business.
So at this point, you're in your 30s?
Just beginning my 28, 29.
Children, kind of family?
Family had moved to Chester, settled down in the UK, family, etc., growing. And and children in school, so it was necessary to kind of stay with the business, develop the business, and build the business. The private equity world sometimes moves quick and sometimes moves slow. But this one was a fast-moving one. And back then as well, you had difficult situations with regard to the economy. It certainly wasn't stable. It certainly wasn't growing fast. We managed to build that business from a relatively small business, managed to make it into a solutions business. And that was my first example of building a solutions technology business. And I helped to build an R&D center in the UK, Australia, Asia Pacific, and North America. So I built out technical centers around the world.
How do you, so kind of a couple of questions. Private equity gets a bad rap a lot of the time, particularly in industrial kind of sectors for kind of buying up and moving stuff elsewhere. You've had a good experience with private equity, and I think you've always had a kind of successful track record of working with PE. Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I do think sometimes PE gets a bad rap, primarily because a lot of people look at it as basically a takeover situation and a shutdown situation. It's not always the case. A lot of private equity companies actually invest and build the businesses. They're there to try to make money during that journey. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it can be 3 years or 4 years. Sometimes one of my last ones was more than 12, 13 years with the business. So sometimes they stay a long time. It depends on the drive and the aim of the private equity group. And very similar with venture capital as well. I think they're just slightly different at different points of that spectrum. So I've been successful with most of my private equity companies I've been involved in during my corporate career. Yes.
Is that kind of something you've learned and had mentors along the way, or you got lucky? It was the right sort of portfolio managers and investment managers you were working with. Do you think is it a constant maintaining the relationship, or has it just been luck?
I think it's a bit of everything. You have to have the right team within the company that's taken over.
So you've performed essentially. You've always performed as a group, and
yes, we have performed, or we've delivered as a group. We've also embraced. I mentioned a couple of times change. We've embraced change. I had very early in my career. I had an example of a change manager who wrote a book on change management, who formerly worked for Coca-Cola. I'd never experienced change management until he taught me what change management was all about. It was that was an eye opener for me. And I think you have to embrace change. You also have to have the right private equity partner alongside you. I think so many people just go out to private equity and just get the money and think that's it. We've got the cash, we can do it, or the debt equity, we can do it. But you have to have that partner working with you, alongside you. A strong board, I think. Great vision and I think mission and values within the business, and that has to be instilled within the business. And I think most importantly, you have to have everyone on the same page. If you don't get the result.
Interesting. And you're kind of, you've always, when I listen to your story and listen to you talk, from a young age, you seem to be in leadership roles. You seem to have been given opportunities or managed to secure opportunities to grow teams. I mean, building an R&D team from scratch, I think, kind of being headhunted to build R&D. Was it Scapa?
Scapa, yes, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
It was. Where did that kind of leadership mentor or role models come from for you?
I was lucky enough, I think, during my growing up period. I lost my dad at a young age as well.
Nice. So you're going to be eldest brother, are you?
I was the eldest of three, right. 3 sisters. So that kind of made me grow up very fast, and actually made me kind of the head of the family very quickly. And also gave me the ability to express myself in my professional career also. So I took that sounding into my professional career and started to build teams. You make mistakes along the way. They're not perfect. Some of the teams were established. Some of them had to be changed over the years. Some of them had to be molded. But I think building out teams is a really interesting part of anyone's career, and developing teams. And one of the things I've been very proud of is the fact that I've developed some people into, now they're leaders in their own right. So it's very hard, I think, it's more difficult, I think, if people are not given the opportunity to develop themselves during their career. I think some people then get frustrated, and of course they move, or they're not satisfied. But if you develop people during their careers, I think they really respect that, and they really appreciate the opportunities they've been given. And the other thing is, I think you've then along that journey, you've got to trust people. They're given the opportunity, but you got to trust them to do the job. And I think that's a very important aspect of leadership.
That must be particularly difficult if you're going through change management processes as well, as the industry's changing, or if you're getting new investors in.
Yes, it can be. Or if, for instance, you're merging or you're acquiring, and that's the hardest part, I think, of change management and leadership. I have gone on to acquire a number of businesses as well through my latter career in corporate. And I've learned a lot through that as well, especially since when I moved from formerly SCAP, it was taken over by a Dutch business, and then we went on to acquire a number of businesses, which was then acquired again by private equity, Dutch private equity, into an American operation. So those changes occur during an evolving process of business. The other big change that happens is the marketplace. You have to then move with the market and move into the market and develop your products that suit the market. Not the other way around, not develop products that may go to the market one day. A lot of companies nowadays just have the D, they don't have the R. So very early in my career as well, I linked a lot with universities and institutes to do the R bit, because I felt that was extremely important, not to have the company strapped with lots of research, but to have it developing and trialing and moving that technology into the marketplace.
That's really interesting. That's something a lot of businesses struggle with, whether they're big or small, is how to tap effectively the capabilities and the resources of universities and chemistry departments in particular. So was that something you were tasked with, or was that something you just took the initiative and said, there's some bright people up the road that I think can help us solve this problem?
Yeah, I spent my early career developing filter businesses, and I was involved a lot in the Filtration Society, and through that was linked through a lot of universities, and we managed through that to start to develop master's and PhD programs very early, not just in science, but also master programs in business as well. So I put a number of people in my teams through master programs in business. Once they decided that was the direction of travel they wanted to go. But bringing them through universities in the UK, in the Netherlands, in the United States, Australia, Asia Pacific. So I did it on a global basis, and we picked the universities that were best suited to our needs.
Does that differ, the cultures or the approaches of universities in different countries? Is the UK culture different from Netherlands to the US? Did you kind of develop different playbooks or different approaches for working with universities in different countries?
Yes, I think different educational systems differ around the world. The caliber and the type of people differ as well. But you have to adopt to cultural and nuances in different countries. I was lucky to be able to travel with my businesses and to expand these people and develop these people. Most of it was receptive. They wanted to develop themselves. They wanted to develop skills in technology businesses that I worked in, and they wanted to grow in the area of or discipline that they were involved in. I think you have to, as I said, you have to also pick as well as picking the right, I suppose, capital company you're working with, the right team, the right leadership. You also have to pick the right university, and I was lucky to pick some good universities around the world. There are some great universities here in the northwest of the UK, but some great universities in different places. What you learn by picking universities in different disciplines, you find out quickly which ones work, which ones don't, and then you drop the ones that don't, and you start to work more collaboratively with the ones that do. They become your right or left arm to help you build out your business in that particular region.
That's really interesting. Is there a difference between the deep tech startup world you're in now and how you interact with universities to how you did it when you were in big corporate?
Not so much. I think the deep tech world, I was always probably in deep tech or clean tech. With filtration, you're always in clean tech. But in the deep tech world, I suppose I'm now in broader subject matters. I'm in everything from energy through to med tech, through to AI, through to I'm still involved a little bit in filtration. But the deep tech world itself has only emerged. That terminology has only emerged in the last 5 to 10 years. There's always been a little bit of deep tech existing in industry. In universities, and I suppose this sixth wave of innovation is starting to bring forward that deep tech philosophy.
Materials have always been.
It's always been there. I'm a material scientist for the last 37 years. But I think what's happening now is the convergence of technologies is in a very interesting space. So you have material scientists working with digital tech people. You have energy people working with software engineers. You have chemists working with physics. You've always had this maybe in the very high end businesses. You know, if you look at NASA, if you look at Formula One, if you look at some of the very high engineered businesses in the world, high tech businesses in the world, they've always had multidisciplinary teams. I think that's more coming into play now in the mainstream industrial sector because of the convergence of technology and the need to converge technologies together and build technologies together.
That convergence angle is really interesting. Does the lessons from your change management and M&A, do they kind of help when you're working in those interdisciplinary teams?
I think so, yes. I've already gone through those change managements in industry. I can certainly help universities. I've been a visiting professor at 2 universities in the UK, 2 Russell Groups, and that was starting probably in the 2000s in those universities. I think it's now happening across more mainstream universities and certainly across here the Northwest where I'm involved in, and also 1 or 2 universities in Ireland I'm involved in. Yes, it's happening more and more in those universities.
What motivated you to get into that kind of the civic side of thing or the strategy and policy? But I know you did a lot of work in the States, so that, and you've spoken very vocally about the need for investments and the need for ecosystems and making sure we scale businesses in the UK. Was there a particular moment when you thought, actually, I want to get involved in more of this stuff?
Yeah, I probably thought a little bit more about this when I was finishing one of my last corporate roles with a Dutch company. And I thought maybe this is the time. Also, COVID changed a lot of people's perspective on industry, on life, on maybe their outlook and their place. And I felt that was probably the time there was a switch for me. And that's when I started working with more universities, institutes, and maybe also started to look at startups and the angel space. I'd already done a 30-something year career in corporate. And I thought maybe I could bring this knowledge, know-how, mentorship that I'd learned, leadership I'd learned along the way into the early stage companies that was coming out of universities. I was already involved a little bit with University of Manchester. I'm chair.
You're very modest about this. So it's you know the work you've done in Manchester. You have a reputation as being somebody who absolutely knows the discipline. Somebody who's very generous with his time with young startups and young entrepreneurs and the network. You're a calming influence. You're always on the networking scene. You're incredibly well connected, but you are this kind of calming and incredibly credible and expert influence. So that came from the Manchester scene originally.
Yeah, I did. I was always on the. I was always involved in materials in Manchester from my early days in filtration. And
this is you as a corporate guy saying, "I want a bit of R&D doing."
Correct.
Solve this problem.
We during the Madison Scapa, even the Povere days, we had connections with Manchester, and that got me involved in the advisory board of Manchester University in materials. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've chaired that advisory board. We have a 16-strong advisory board with multidisciplinary people from everything from oil and gas through to energy through to the automotive
This
sector.
is advising on academic research direction or on commercialization and kind of industrial.
Bit of everything. So we get involved in the in a little bit in the teaching side, in advising on strategy, advising on the pillars for innovation going forward. We help also with the with their training, with the development. Manchester's very open like that and has been for a number of years. And I think the building out also of the institutes in Manchester. Everyone knows Manchester because of graphene now, but Manchester was very famous for textiles for 200 odd years.
Yeah.
And materials grew out of textiles, of course, material science and engineering. Of course, it's very famous because of the nuclear industry as well, and it has the academy there as well. But when Manchester merged with NUMIST, merged with the University of Manchester, the old university of Victoria University, they formed two big groups. They formed the material side or the science side together with the business side, and that gave them the footholding, I think, in both camps. And they used that program very well to bring, I think, a lot of new disciplines into the university. It made them stronger as a university.
Is this under Nancy Rothwell's reign?
Prior to that, but Nancy certainly cemented the work there in terms of bringing it together. And I think the new vice chancellor is doing exactly the same, but he's doing more outreach into the community. So one of the things that's happening there is they're building ecosystems. I'm very familiar from ecosystems from Boston, from Silicon Valley, from also working across Germany in the Ruhr area, where I worked for a number of years, and working with the universities there, and how places like the Fraunhofer Institute developed, how other institutes across the globe developed. And coming back to my home country, Ireland, with foreign direct investment, they needed science and engineering to be clustered as well around some of the businesses they brought in. So they linked with a lot of the universities in Dublin, Galway, Limerick, Cork, and they formed institutes in their own right, helping then the businesses that were affiliated with them, be it pharmaceutical, be it semicon, be it technology businesses and materials businesses. And I think the UK is still evolving that. I think in the south they've got it correct in terms of the Golden Triangle, where they have the Cambridge, Oxford, and London very well connected in terms of that multidisciplinary approach to research, but also they have the sites. Then they have the science parks, very well structured, whereby which if somebody comes out as a spin out or a technology business, you can easily get funding and develop it from there. And they have structured it very well in terms of signposting. Everyone knows where to go. Everyone knows where to find that funding. And the last part of that is collaborative work. They collaborate and work with each other in order to get that funding for small businesses. We're still learning that here in the Northwest, and we're still developing it here in the north of the UK.
It's interesting. Everyone thinks of Silicon Valley. Everyone thinks of the tech scene. Is there for me, one of the hackneyed things is all politicians say we are going to be the Silicon Valley of insert name of place here. For materials, was there a kind of a different playbook or a different set of lessons when you went to materials clusters in Boston? Did you see a difference between that and the sort of the software development, digital ecosystem kind of exemplars? It's more industrial. You've got research intensive industries, but then they mature and they need big processes and big facilities.
Yeah, in 2 companies back, I was fortunate enough to work with a great entrepreneur in the United States, and that was part of Filtration Group, and we managed to build a very large company. We already had sold a business to this business in 2013, and from there we built out quite a number of new businesses, startup businesses, but they were SMEs that were taken over. And we had some starter technologies as
So these
well.
are daughter companies, essentially out of parents.
Not necessarily. There was a daughter company in the parent company to start with, but it was a buy and build strategy.
Okay. So you're in acquisition mode.
We were in
You're looking
acquisition
for
mode.
talented people, talented technology. Yeah.
Absolutely. VC, but this was patient VC. And I remember his first words, the owner's first words to me was, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to build something lasting. We want to build something that we will be remembered by. And I was with them for 6 years, from 2013 to 2019. And we started to build both the academic connections, but also the business connections needed in order to help facilitate these businesses, build them out. When you acquire businesses, sometimes the management don't want to be part of that future scenario. That's not a bad thing, but you have to know that during the acquisition process. And certainly then you have to try to modify and build the business accordingly, or integrate the business. A lot of VCs and a lot of private equity companies are very good at the acquisition. They're not very good at the integration. And integration is the hard part. Building it into a like-minded business. Does it fit with the business as well? Is there another similar business in the organization that it could fit with, where 1 and 1 equals 3? This particular group was very good at doing that and made them into groups. And when you have larger groups, it's very helpful, because basically then you have got more power. You've got more buying power. You've got more development power. You've got more research power. Instead of going with 20 people to a meeting, you effectively have maybe 40 or 50 people in a meeting room. That gives you a lot of different ideas for the next phase of the business, and develops the business. And the good thing about that organization, they develop great leadership skills, very disciplined, structured leadership skills in how to build businesses, how to build big businesses, how to build billion-pound businesses.
Wow.
And what was required. And that was a real interesting insight for me, how to develop those businesses. And the United States are very good US is very good at doing that. They also have this scenario where failure is not bad. Failure is sometimes good. You have to learn to fail, to learn to move on, and to get to the next stage. And we think failure here is bad, but actually failure, if you learn from your mistakes and move on, it's a great thing.
That's really interesting. So what does a good team look like for that acquisition model? Because presumably you've grown that long-term value by having a vision. You've seen a load of businesses that could be more than they are, or underperforming, or have technologies that are about to take off. You've seen the whole kind of picture of how they all work together, or could potentially work together in a group. What's the process? How do you build a team that can go in and acquire those businesses, raise the financing, do the change management, integrate them, the integration bits?
Yeah, I was part during that period. I was part of some of the integration teams, and I was the technology person, and helping to put the right people in place for some of the integration was difficult. You had to have great communication. You had to have good, constant communication with your team, with their teams. You had to be also very disciplined in terms of the time it took. So it didn't happen overnight. It would happen over a year's period or a 2-year period, depending on the size of the business you acquired. This business acquired everything from 10 million to 150 million or 200 million businesses.
A big, complex,
it was
potentially old beasts as well.
Were. Some were very well established. Some had great potential. Some were not loved. Some were part of some other organization that may have not liked them or loved them, or said they're surplus to requirements. Some were on their own. So you had to have different playbook for each of the companies you acquired. And the holding company was very good at managing this process and developing this process and building out the playbook accordingly. And I learned a lot from that process, from, I suppose, also patient capital and patient management. You couldn't be too patient on the management side because they wanted results. And if you didn't get results within a 6-12 month period, Yeah, there was going to be change,
Yeah.
and change would be forced upon you.
How did you build your own teams? You didn't do all this alone. You've built some brilliant teams that have supported you and helped you along the way, and integrated beyond the technical into the other realms. What was your journey of kind of building and leading those teams?
Yes, I've built some great teams around the world of research people, technical people, business development people, sales teams. I think you have to have above you and around you, you have to have also the right leaders that's going to support you. Most importantly, you all have to be, as I said earlier, on the same page. You all have to have a vision and mission and values that's going to drive this business forward, and that has to be clear to everyone. And finally, I think you've got to pick the right people for your team. I'll go back to one example in Germany. We were called the United Nations of this company. I think I had 13 nationalities working for me at one point in the technical team alone. My boss at the time used to say it was very interesting always going into the R&D lab. One example, maybe a soft example of what I do maybe at Christmas, I take the whole team out for Christmas, and you had to bring one thing along from your country, and you had to bring one bit of music along from your country, just to show. I had everyone from India through to Pakistan. Now that was an interesting scenario, having a Pakistani and an Indian working together in the same team, and I had people from Ukraine, Russia. I had people from North America, continental Europe, Latin America, etc. So getting people to work and collaborate together is a very interesting scenario. Not alone getting these teams to work together, but then getting the team in a different jurisdiction to work with them, that's even harder. But it's a lesson you adapt and you gain along the journey.
You said something really interesting earlier. You learn to kind of lead with people above and alongside you as well. Is how does that work for you? Is kind of sheltering your own team or helping them understand the constraints or concerns of adjacent units or people you're working for higher up? How do you build those relationships with other leaders to make sure everything runs smoothly?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. I think in general you have to be prepared to be flexible. They have to be prepared to be flexible with you. I think you have to get on with them. If you don't, it can be difficult. And as leaders, you have to learn to trust each other. In other words, you're going to do your job. We're going to let you do your job. And by the way, we'll give you the time and space to do that. It doesn't always work. And I think you also have to tell your team, be honest with your team, all the time. And I think the last thing you have to do is if something goes wrong, if you're the leader, you take it.
The ownership.
You take the ownership, but you take the responsibility. And if it does go wrong, you take the flak for it as well.
Cool. One of the things you're a strong advocate for is investment in property as well to support innovation ecosystems. Talk us through that a little bit, because that quite often that can be a contrary point when people say there's enough money that goes into property, we need more money into people, we need more money into businesses. But you're a strong advocate for you need to build it for them to come, I think. Yeah,
I am. I've seen this around the world. I've been fortunate enough to work in different countries and seeing how they've built these systems, the ecosystems out in different countries in the Bay Area, in Chicago, in Silicon Valley. Across Germany, even down to Australia and Asia. And Asia is moving at an extremely fast pace. They're building the buildings and people are coming. But we've done something similar in Manchester, as you probably are aware.
Unit M system, Manchester Innovation District is huge.
Yes, that's right, yeah. But you may not know, but they have a lot of institutes in Manchester as well. I think last count, it was something over 20 institutes in Manchester connected with the university. And them alone will create the connections with this two in graphene alone, as you're probably aware, the geek and the NGI. And they alone will create their own spin-outs, spin-ins. So Manchester is creating a lot of spin-outs, spin-ins through the Innovation Factory. And therefore, there is need for space for those spin-outs, spin-ins. And of course, Manchester is confined because it's right in the centre of Manchester. You do have the science parks, but a lot of the universities have actually also got the founders as academics. So they don't necessarily maybe want to leave their job or lose that job. So they want to be connected still with the university. And in order to do so, you have to be close to the university. So Sister was being formed, Unit M has been formed, the buildings have been, the old UMIST building, some of that building is now being converted over to space for these startup spin-outs. You may recall in Manchester you used to have the arches as part of that. I think something similar should be happening in some of the big cities like Liverpool as well. And I'm a big LCR especially. We're sitting here today in Daresbury, a wonderful facility, great ecosystem, 150 startups at this site, been working with Daresbury now since 2018, 2019. Knew the team here back in the 90s when it started, or the 2000s when it started, and had collaborative work with them, even back to the days when people like Hitachi came, etc. And through the SCMs, I bought a lot of my SCMs from them for my labs. So in effect, these ecosystems are really interesting and useful because they bring people together, they bring similar type of people together. And when you're a startup, you're on your own. And by having an ecosystem around you, you have support. And what we've been doing here with certainly with the Future Club, which I'm
talk a little bit about that more. So you're a mentor in the Future Club. This is an initiative by Daresbury, by the SciTech team here.
Correct. Yes. I've been a mentor here now since it started, since 2018, 2019. The team approached me, wanted some help in leadership and wanted some help in mentoring, and I became a mentor. I've taken a number of companies through that program over the years. I've generally taken one or two. What we do there is we have anything from 15 to 20 applicants per year. We pick 5 startups that we will mentor. We give them some space. Here in Daresbury, we have a team of mentors. We have 5 or 6 mentors, all similar to me, with different disciplines, different backgrounds. And we also have goal partners. We align with those that help them. Everything from accountancy to intellectual property, through to marketing, through to business development. And the mentors can come in and out of the startups when required, or the startup founder can contact us. And I've been successful in bringing at least 3 or 4 through to £2 million funding.
So very
rounds.
Successful in terms of funding rounds.
Getting some money for them. Yes, yeah. So, and that's established them. That's given them the ability to build a team. I've even mentored them on team building, especially with my background in building R&D teams, technical teams, innovation teams, and business development teams. So those disciplines come through in startups as well. And I think in Liverpool, we are just starting to do some work now with the Angels, with the development in Cheshire. We're doing something similar. And we're developing those out into little funding groups that will hopefully network and come together, something similar to what I mentioned in the South, what's happened in the South with the Golden Triangle. I think we've got the perfect Golden Triangle here between Cheshire, Liverpool and Manchester in terms of the building something similar in terms of funding groups that could help startups.
What's holding us back? I mean, from my point of view, I look at kind of Oxford, Cambridge, London. It's hard to fail. You've got some of the most prestigious elite universities inherently, turning out some of the brightest people, massive endowments, very wealthy universities. It's the southeast as well. It's tough to fail there. Are there lessons you can transpose from there to here, and are there any that don't work?
I think we've got good universities here.
I'm not saying we haven't. That's a bit we edit out.
Yeah. I think we've got to connect the universities more with the businesses that the business needs in the Northwest. I'm a big adversary for SMEs. We have a lot of SMEs. SMEs are the backbone of the UK economy.
Agreed.
And we often don't support them. The SMEs don't have time for the R. That's obvious. They're too busy now trying to fight fires, trying to support their staff. They've had a lot of issues over the last number of years. Brexit being a big issue for them, the paperwork surrounding that, the issues now with cost of energy in the UK and the issues surrounding, I suppose, government pressures that have come on them in terms of just in the last year, tax and national insurance. So we've got to support them through, I think, the university scene if we can, or the institute scene. And there's a great opportunity there for the institutes to link with them through some mechanism, and help them on that orbit. And it's a win-win situation for both. And with what's happening in novel and innovating and leadership here, I think that's a perfect platform for doing that. And I'm very happy to be involved in novel and what all it's doing for the region as well. I think we've got to be very we've got to do a little bit more work with the startup scene. Startups here in the UK are not, or sorry, in the UK in general, but in this part of the country is not very well signposted or connected. They don't know where to go for funding.
Is the capital there?
I think
investors here in the marketplace, or
so the ones I have funded so far in the north have all had to go either to the south or overseas for capital. There are small pockets of capital. At the moment, it's too small. If you want to go for £1 million round or £1.5 million round for a startup, to angels and VCs, it'll be usually 5 or 6 or 7 VCs that get together.
Which comes with its own challenges of putting a cap table together for a group of investors as opposed to one person saying I'm in.
But even before you put the cap table together, it's very hard for that founder to go out to go out to 6 or 7, and they'll have to probably go out to 20 or 30 groups. That's a lot of time and effort and money they've just spent trying to get those 5 or 6 good ones together. And they have to be collaborative ones. So if it's in the clean tech space, if it's in the deep tech space, if it's in the green space or in the industrial space, they have to find like-minded funders that's going to come together to do that. They also have to find a lead investor, and we don't have many good lead investors yet in the north, and that's a problem.
Pension funds, the answer to that? Do we need more ambition and more kind of?
We do. We have Northern Gritstone starting up in the last few years here. They haven't funded that many yet in Manchester and Liverpool. They have started funding some in Leeds and Sheffield. That is a big fund. But they don't fund a huge amount in the real startup. I mean, pre-seed and seed.
Okay.
Yeah, they will fund probably Series A, Series B area, or a bigger fund requirement. We have also the habit here of not maybe asking for enough funds for these startups.
That's interesting.
So I think one of the problems with startups is they run out of cash very quick. They don't look at the runway more than 18 months, 2 years down the road. In the States, what I've noticed with companies of that ilk, they'll ask for 3-4 million or 5 million, depending on the sector you're in. We tend to just ask for $1 million here. $1 million in a startup will probably just last you maybe 18 months, 2 years.
By the time you should be getting to market, you're worried about the cliff of cash flow and raising more funding, and that takes everybody's eye off the ball.
And I think we're a little bit slow in asking for more money here in that scenario. Or we don't maybe it's the discipline within the UK culture not to ask for more funding. I think also Innovate UK do some match funding. There is a lot of match funding now through the programs with. Through matched innovating funding, through venture capital funds, and I think Innovate UK probably do need to do more of that.
So you're an advocate for the match funding model of
I am,
a bit of public money to go with.
I am, and we have been successful with 1 or 2 or 3 of the startups I've been involved in to get match funding with Innovate. I think they probably need to be more focused. They have had a scattergun approach to this in the past.
Is that treating the symptom rather than the root cause of the disease? Are we, if we do that, are we not? Will we not get into the nub of the matter that we need to ask for more money and have a richer private capital market?
Yes, and I think maybe we have a habit in the regions of trying to fund too many businesses. So maybe a good example would be here in Liverpool. We often look at maybe 20, 30 startups. If we picked maybe a handful of good ones to fund and gave them more, they'd have a better runway and a better chance. I think also the angel funders and the established funders here in Liverpool have relatively small amounts of money to fund. So anything from 50,000 to about 200,000, that's a relatively small amount. And that means that a founder has to go to 4 or 5. You'd want to be probably looking at between 2 and 400,000 or 500,000 per venture group, and then bringing those together and making them work together to fund locally, together with some match funding from Innovate or some other body.
So whether you invest in 50k or 500k, the cost of the machinery and the infrastructure is pretty much the same as on the investment side.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it just takes as equally as much time. You know, if you have a funder that's only coming in with 50,000, I've funded businesses just with individual angels. It's really hard. You have to spend an awful lot of time nurturing those angels. As one person told me, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to get that money. But I think in principle, I think it would be good. The other thing is, you mentioned earlier about space, and I'm a big adversary of space, making the buildings available. We're very lucky here in Liverpool. We've got a lot of buildings. If you look at the Liverpool city itself, with what's happening along the docks, wouldn't it be great to have an eco space for innovation that's created? Not necessarily the knowledge quarter, which is relatively small, and Manchester is something like that as well, but actually where the businesses can go and develop and employ, let's say 20, 30 people.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. And by having those, they work off each other, they collaborate together. And we're very lucky in Liverpool. We've got a lot in medtech. We've got a lot we've got a lot of the institutes already here in disease, in the MIF, in the DIF. So we've got the digital, we've got the materials. We've got a lot of the centres already coming out of the university, and I think those centres now need to think about the next phase of their growth and development and how they're going to build out businesses of the future.
This is why I like talking to you. I'm seeing a vision in my head come together now of that kind of just north of the city, around Bootle, around the new Everton Stadium. That was old school Liverpool industrial space.
Correct.
They're old Victorian warehouses. You don't want to gentrify that space. You want to turn it into the new industrials. Those kind of 20 to 30 person spaces for people making stuff, producing stuff.
Correct.
Who will then scale out to the big box parks and the bigger industrial parks and
I
the
think
motorways.
if we learn from the past, they were the that's where all the cotton and the textile material came in that fed Manchester. That was the part of the Industrial Revolution. Tobacco warehouse, huge big building up there. There are massive infrastructural buildings that are there already. Brownfield sites, perfect for redevelopment. I know that the city and the mayor has great plans to develop that, but I think putting some of that aside, I think the plan is 2.5% of GVA into innovation, I think I heard. Even taking a small fraction of that and putting an eco space together wouldn't be a bad idea for the future for Liverpool to think about it. And having people live but actually work in the city is also very good from an economic and structural and city point of view for the future. That makes a city work. It's med cities work in Asia, in America, in continental Europe for centuries, and it will continue to do so. And I think having that approach is very good. You can put a lot of flats there if they want, but actually where do the people get the jobs?
Yeah, and that kind of space in North Liverpool, that's the urbanite young, not necessarily entrepreneur, but those high skilled jobs people who are don't have kids yet, want to maintain the city lifestyle to be able to have a chemistry job or materials job in the city. That's brilliant.
And we're starting some of that groundwork. I do a little bit of work with the Royal Academy of Engineers, as you're aware. I'm on the sounding board of that as well, and that's it's
the Enterprise Hub.
The Enterprise Hub, and we've just established that in Liverpool last year in 25, and we're already bringing the first cohort of 10 new startups through that, through the engine room, or through the engine hub that's been formed, and I'm working extremely closely with Ben and the team there to develop that out. And wouldn't it be wonderful if even half of those in the future establish their business in Liverpool? And there's plenty of scope for this in the future. And wouldn't it be great if we brought 10 from the universities and the institutes through that as well, through a similar program, or 5 or 6 that we bring through the Future Club here, through Liverpool and have them establish businesses. So there's enough of small groups. There's an example of 20, 25 businesses that are already starting, startups already that I'm partially involved in or helping and mentoring. Wouldn't it be great if those businesses of the future established themselves in Liverpool itself?
And Royal Academy of Engineering, the Orange stuff, I did my policy fellowship with them, and that was a big driver for Novel, was kind of the work there. It is the mentors, the connections that Royal Academy of Engineering, it is top quality stuff. That they are it was an eye-opening experience for me as the network of people they've got in very senior positions and very senior and big organizations that are willing to give you their time. So we're starting to bring kind of outside influencers in, we're starting to bring kind of bigger change makers in. What's the opportunity with Oxford and Cambridge? So we've got land, we've got people, we've got electricity, we've got a coastline, we've got decent road connections, we've got a legacy of materials innovation. What's the opportunity for the Golden Triangle in the Northwest?
I think it's interesting when you look at the Golden Triangle. It's already built. Cambridge Science Park is virtually full. Oxford has very little space. London has no space. In effect, it's very little brownfield space left. There will be buildings in the future, of course, if you knock and you reestablish a building again. But I feel we've got plenty of space up here, and the collaboration that's established between, I think, UNITM and Cambridge has been very interesting. They're looking at opportunities here in the north now, because in general, there's a lot of tech startups, as good at tech startups here as anywhere. They're a good value. And they can get buildings that are not so expensive. And I think there's lots of opportunities to take that model and, as I said, build that triangle. We're already thinking about the infrastructure. They've got good networks in the south. I mean, transport infrastructure. The metro mayors are already starting to think about that now for the next 10 years. The connectivity is very good in Liverpool with the super fiber broadband technology and the network that's been building there. So the processes are there. The will is there. I think now they need to bring through that leadership, the coaching, the mentoring, and bring it through and connect the universities with those SMEs like Novel has been doing for the last year now. I always use the analogy: innovation is interesting, innovating is great. So if you have an innovation process, it's fine, but actually doing the innovating is the key.
And that's always got to fall back to the private sector. That's always entrepreneurial individuals. It's always companies and private investors for me that actually do the finished product.
Yes, I think we could attract more, like they did in the South, more private equity and venture capital and more high net worth people.
What does that look like? That what does an investor summit? What does the prospectus for a city like Liverpool or a region like Cheshire look like? If you want to bring big money in, how do you do it? How do you bring those funders and get those panels together of really deep pockets?
I think we're already starting. We're on our second now AI summit here in Liverpool. I've attended both. They've been wonderful. The last one just last year has been attended by well over 1,000 people, and Liverpool's making that a kind of a cornerstone. It's also got the icon with the centre.
Janet Hemingway stuff.
Janet Hemingway, and also it's got the centres already. The early stages of the institutes already starting with the Materials Innovation Centre and the Digital Innovation Factory, and ideas. I think by having them more identified, by giving them more market space, by giving them more credibility, and as I said, bringing 4 to 5 good technologies through them, and giving an example of growth and development from a startup from those, will be very interesting, and will bring people to say, okay, well, actually, there's something interesting happening here. There is potential for investment in these businesses and development in these businesses, and the venture capital people can make money with these businesses and grow these businesses into SMEs and maybe grow them into fine big businesses in the future. Maybe not $1 billion yet, but certainly they can be developed.
So you'd focus on a smaller number of really promising or really niche technologies rather than the
I think so. I think the money's not there to fund everyone. And I think it has to be collaborative money as well. It has to be a bit of private equity money or venture capital money. Venture capital to start with and seed funding, together with maybe some funding money maybe from government. And it might be also a three-way scenario. It could be also the Metro Mayor has got this fund, these funds. They've already established it with AXM and with LIVA, but it's still a relatively small amount of money. But at least we're starting in terms of the seed and the pre-seed, seed and Series A fund. But that has to follow on. That's yet not there. So we're only starting with that scenario. There's not many Series A and Series B and C funders here yet in the Northwest that can really have the bandwidth to fund 5 million, 10, 20 million checks.
Is there an opportunity with more established businesses? I mean, if you put your other hat on from your M&A days now, if you're doing M&A at a macro economic regional level, those established SMEs that we have who are long trading histories, have high potential to get innovating, maybe have never thought about raising the sort of capital and having the degree of ambition that your experience with the startups. How would you work with established businesses to say, look, you can make more of this business?
Yeah, I think that's something that Novel can help with as well. I wouldn't be afraid if I was an SME about going out, starting to raise capital or money if they needed it.
It's a different challenge set because you've got turnover, you've got staff, you've got everything you need, but at the same time you've got to feed them and you don't want to break the machine and risk what you've got by going off and being disruptive, I guess.
Correct.
But equally, if you want to stay competitive, you really want to grow, then you've got to do that. So is there a different playbook or a different approach when you work with those mature businesses?
I'll go back to a little bit of research I did with a former colleague of yours, Lynn, during COVID. We looked at 50 SMEs here in the Northwest. We looked at raising some money, as you may remember, for materials businesses. We focused in on that, and we focused in on just industrial businesses. What we found, one of the hidden findings of that was some of those entrepreneurs and business builders were actually aging. They're actually in their 50s, 60s. A lot of those businesses will be either taken over or will be forced to take over at some point in the future. And I think they have to embrace change. They have to embrace that change. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes when you bring, as I said, in my experience, when you bring two businesses together, you can become more powerful. One business can specialize in one particular area and another business can specialize in another. 2 or 3 of those businesses I brought together, I focused the D in one of the businesses and the manufacturing in the other and split them out. So it's possible that basically the business can grow and develop and become a bigger business in the region rather than shrink and be closed down. But I think they have to embrace that change and they have to look at that change. They also have the power then to also go and do the R. And that's where the university comes in and could link with them, or the institute comes in and could link with them in order to create that master's or PhD that's needed to feed that business for the future and look at a 3 or 4 year, 5 year stage gate project.
So that's localizing supply chain for you. But you've been really successful internationally. So fundamentally, if we want to bring more money into the economy, we've got to go abroad and sell stuff and take money off somebody else and bring it back to the country. What would be your kind of words of wisdom or your tips either for established SMEs that are bigger or for startups on being bold enough to go out and sell? Because frequently that's a barrier. It's breaking into new markets.
Yeah, I mentioned the converging of technologies earlier, and I think digital marketing is coming into play now. Even my daughter is a digital marketeer and very good at it as well. But I like we're doing today, we're podcasting. So I think you've got to use all mechanisms and mediums to try to get your message across and getting it out there. I also feel that maybe some of these SMEs and companies are probably stuck in their ways in the past and don't necessarily adopt change or build change into their business. Some of them had to change and adopt during Brexit and were forced into that change in a way. to supply the same product they were supplying, in January, in December and January 1st into the same European states. I think we also are living in the time of difficulty in terms of tariffs, and they have to adopt and change to that. So I think that's why I said to you earlier that a lot of them are firefighting those scenarios still trying to maintain their businesses and grow their businesses. My recommendation would be from the ones I did around the world is don't be afraid to look outside your own discipline and get help. Even if a leader of a business doesn't know everything, he or she hasn't got the skill sets to kind of do everything in the business, and they have to surround themselves with good people. Go seek those people, even if it's part-time. Go seek mentors. Even build yourself a decent advisory board. A lot of SMEs don't have any boards. They built their business themselves. They've been successful. They built it up to about maybe 15, 20, 30 people. I've previously, you were involved with a business I was involved with 10 years ago. We built a small business in Cheshire. We built it out. We built it into a successful 1.5 million business. That's from 400,000. That can propel itself into another scale. So companies can build and grow businesses in different ways, and I think those are the tips I would probably give a small business if they were being successful building a product or technology. They don't have to do all the innovating, as I said. Link to a like-minded university that could help you. It's not that expensive in relative terms to get a master's or PhD. You're also getting yourself a resource, perhaps for the future, that might want to work with you, and you're giving a job to a younger person that's coming through, and you're showing a STEM student or an engineer student what's possible in terms of this business and what it can be and how it can develop.
How do you feel about your kind of profile as a role model for those people? Because you are somebody who's got the technical discipline, who's been very successful and had quite a varied career. What would your advice be to kind of young people coming up and saying, okay, maybe I'm starting out in materials industry as a young exec or a kind of graduate? What do you wish you'd known then that you know now to get to where you got to?
Great question, Andrew. Okay. What would I have done differently? Maybe I would probably have. I probably wouldn't have done many things differently, Andrew, in terms of just the approach I've taken to business. You always have to think a little bit ahead. That always happens in industry. You probably don't be afraid of change. Embrace change. Good communication with your subordinates and your leadership team around you. I would recommend that the science industry is very interesting right now, and the STEM industry is very interesting. Go get yourself into a job, but actually get yourself into a job maybe that you enjoy and you like, into an area you like. Also, don't be afraid to perhaps do a master's or PhD. I think
alongside the day job, or you check
perhaps,
out and go back?
Perhaps, yeah. I took some people through masters and PhD as they worked as well, and MBAs. And by working the first 2 or 3 years in the job, 2 years especially, I think, you find out very quickly whether or not this is for you or not. And if it is for you, put yourself forward to say, I'm interested in, especially at your reviews. Don't be afraid to go and ask, because usually the leaders want to help you. The managers, the directors want to help you develop in the business. They realize they'd like to. It's also a good feeling. To help somebody through, and mentor them is a very interesting thing. I've got people I've mentored all over the world. I got a lovely message 2 weeks ago from a guy I brought from Asia into Germany. Gave him a job in Germany. Now he's a leader in his own right. So lovely to get those messages 10, 15 years later, from people you mentored, 20 years ago, and you brought them through. That's also a nice thing. But I think I would say to them, don't be afraid. Just embrace it. Ask questions. Surround yourself also with similar like-minded people. and that's important. And also look outwards in terms of opportunities that might arise in your discipline, in your area. But I mentioned earlier about the convergence of technology. I think that's a great opportunity for anyone coming through now. If you've come through in a discipline of materials, link a little bit with digital. As you're probably aware, I'm a Ned on an AI company.
Yeah.
Don't know a lot about AI. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years about AI. That was one that came through the Future Club, and that company now we have 13 people working in that company in the UK and the UAE. So that's gone from one person to 13 very quickly, and it will grow even faster. That's a very fast emerging area of science and engineering and technology, and how AI is going to work in science is still interesting and still early stage.
So something that kind of resonates with me, you've mentioned a few times, communication. That's often a soft skill, or that's seen as less valuable. It's not something that's always put up there by a lot of the high profile leaders. I think a lot of the big Silicon Valley tech kind of CEOs, they're not necessarily known as the best communicators, but you really value communication.
I do, and I think the more you talk in business, the better. The more you air your views in business, the better. Air it sometimes cautiously. Don't be brash about it. But certainly express your view. In very early in my career, I learned to express my view in business to leaders, especially during change management, or when a company was going through a change, or going through a merger, or going through an acquisition, or getting rid of people or something like that. And I've had all that in my career. I think you've got to try to embrace that scenario and work with it, and then communicate very effectively in those environments.
Do you consider yourself a specialist or a generalist?
I'm specialist in terms of materials. I've over the years, I suppose, as I've grown in my career, I can be considered a generalist as well. But I'm still a
young
specialist.
Richard, when he was coming up and he's getting picked to run those teams and build those departments up, you were the guy, you were the person in the room that was the absolute specialist on what you were doing.
I suppose I was, and I suppose sometimes it's luck. You're maybe at the right place at the right time. You've got a right leader that identifies that in you and helps you in your career. I've been lucky to have some very good leaders. That's been interesting, and I think, I suppose I went from being very specialized in my early career. You have to start within your specialism and work very hard in your specialism to, I think, establish yourself. You can become more of a generalist as you develop in your career, and you can take on wider responsibilities as you grow older, and as you develop I think your teams get broader and wider. I think that's so. I started in materials and worked my way into general management and leadership.
Do you think that holds true today? You talked about convergence. Would you still view specialists as more valuable than generalists? And is it different between big corporates and startups?
Yeah, within corporates, you can afford to have both specialisms and generalists. And I mentioned my big team I ran in Germany in the laboratories, and also in the United States and Asia. We could afford to have, in the corporates, we could afford to have different disciplines in different parts of the world. We also focused in on particular product ranges and product areas, and then product market combinations. A lot of people probably in smaller businesses don't get involved in a lot of that. They just have one product or two products. And especially in a startup, you only have one product generally. But in corporates, you have multiple products. So you have to have a range of people able to handle different aspects of the product market combination. And then you have to have different people within those teams that support it. And that's what I built in my corporate career. I built a lot of those specialists, but also support generalists who could work across. And some of those people transitioned into product managers, into successful, from lab to product specialists. 2 or 3 of them developed into sales. 2 or 3 of them developed into product, into management. 2 or 3 became leaders in their own right and ran companies and are now CEOs of businesses. So in general, as I said, as they evolve their careers, they become specialists in their own right, or they become generalists in their own right, and they can then become leaders as well.
Interesting. So there is still a place for, particularly in corporate, the value of being very, very good at a narrow discipline. That's what the business kind of gets out of you is your specialism in a particular discipline, and then you evolve out of your specialism. You think?
Correct. I think in corporates, yes, particularly. I think when you're dealing with, and that's the difference with startups. When you're dealing with startups, you just have perhaps a very focused individual, mostly a founder, and maybe one or two around him or her, that then basically build the business and help to develop the idea, and then develop the idea into a product through the TRL process. And as you evolve into the TRL and you move out to TRL 9, that's technology readiness level, when the product is ready to go to market and get into the market space, maybe that product will evolve itself into multiple products, or with various solutions for the marketplace, or maybe a new market emerges. And that way you then move from maybe a specialist with maybe a more generalist person, and maybe you also have a thing called a product specialist or product market specialist that will take that product to market together with the salesperson.
If somebody's in their early career in the materials industry in a big corporate, what sort of environment would you advise them to be looking for? So for me in my career, a lot of the pivotal incidental conversations that have stuck in my head and changed my trajectory have come from people that don't manage me. So I'm a big advocate. You talked earlier about kind of managing the people above you and the people who are running other divisions. The insights, the wisdom that kicks up the arse I've got have been not from my boss, but from people in other divisions or other teams. What should somebody be looking for in terms of a good, nurturing leadership environment? You know, if you had one of your nieces talking to you, Richard, you know, what's the tough lessons and also the supportive kind of character traits of a team that will help somebody really develop?
Great question. I think the advice I would probably give one of my siblings or my nieces would be, in general, to kind of embrace that kind of communication process with your leader. Probably communicate frequently, at least, because nowadays we work a lot remotely. Ever since COVID, a lot of people are working on their own.
Which is horrible for young people because they don't have the role models, they don't have the behaviours to pattern, they don't get to build the relationships with people.
And I would encourage both your leader, but the subordinate group around you, left and right of you. A lot of times your leader might not be the best leader in the world, but actually there might be 2 or 3 or 4 leaders in the business. And what you want to do is take soundings. What you don't want to be doing is, 6 months or 9 months down the road, for figuring out that what your leader was telling you wasn't exactly what the corporate strategy was, or wasn't the direction of travel. And what you should do is just take that sounding left and right of the other managers or other leaders in the business. It helps you. It guides you as well. It gives you a little bit of framing of where you are as well, and it lets you know what they think of you, because I think it's good to get feedback, and it's good to get that feedback on a fairly regular basis without annoying them.
I guess when you get older, both in your career and in life, it's like looking at your parents as you realise they were just people, and decisions they made and things they did were by virtue of circumstance. The same in your professional career. As you get older, you realise why people you worked for or people who are your mentors or your leaders and your role models earlier in your career were the way that they were. What would you do to kind of encourage upon kind of younger executives of saying your bosses have constraints, they behave the way they behave because there's other stuff going on? How would you sort of coach people through that, of being a little bit more forgiving of less than perfect leadership?
Yeah, there's a few bits to that, in fact. I think you also have to realize when you become a boss yourself, you realize you're spread, you're doing lots of other things, you're managing lots of people. So your percentage that you have to offer that individual is lower than the expectation of the person that's coming to you. And they cannot give you the time all the time, every day, to help you. So I think that's what I would advise a young person, that basically that person is very spread. They also have a lot of pressure from above them usually. And that pressure is for various reasons, because they have to manage expectation. They have to manage the budget they've been given. They have to manage the sideways communication, and they'll be at lots of meetings and connected with, let's say, product or technology that's going out in the marketplace as well. I think the younger person should recognize that and should think about basically the time and when they should think carefully about what they go and ask that person above them or that manager, and be maybe consolidated into maybe a weekly get together, or especially now with remote working, at least meet your manager every week or every second week if you can for a debrief. But think maybe before you go into the meeting and have prepared. A lot of people that have worked for me that haven't been so successful haven't prepared well for the meeting and have asked for a meeting but just wanted to chat, and not necessarily. And you can have the chat over a coffee, and you can have the chat about various things in the downtime. And I think it's good to do that. I gave the example of the Christmas party earlier, and that's fantastic. And having maybe away days or having things that you do together is very good. And we even have the away days with the University of Manchester Materials Group. They invite the external advisory board members to come along and meet the whole team. And that's a team of more than 200, 300 people, staff. So that's a lot of people that you don't normally get to see, but you get a lot of, you get to hear a lot during the coffee breaks. And that's good. And I think that's important. But make sure also, I gave advice to a young lady that was working for me once in Germany. If in a meeting, bring your business head in to the meeting, leave your personality outside the door, because often they'll come in with personality issues or issues that are associated with their day, with their thing, but come in with your business head on, because that's very important. Because a leader will have time for the business side of things when they're in the meetings during the day. The personality side you can do in the coffee or in the evening or something like that.
That's a really good insight, is have your agenda and treat it like a client or a supplier relationship. Keep your personal, keep your ego out of it. That's really interesting. Cool. They've just got to accept any help they get. What would you counsel a startup owner or an entrepreneur in terms of making sure they fit with the right non-exec, making sure that they fit with the right funder?
Yeah, I've been doing that now about 6-7 years, and often the founder doesn't fit with the mentor, or the mentor doesn't fit with the founder, or doesn't know enough about that technology or space to be able to help them. And I think that's the first thing. Establish that relationship first, and establish that process first to see if they fit together. The mentor soon tells you whether or not this isn't for me or this is not for me.
That was going to be my next question: is who makes the decision that we need to break up, or this isn't worth taking any further?
Yeah,
so you think it is?
I think very quickly the mentor
will
will
say
tell.
I'm not the right fit.
There's also a very good team running it here, as you know, with Stephen, John, Paul, etc. And they're very good at identifying and putting the right mentor with the right company, or trying to, at least to start with. So that shortcuts the process. You also have 12 months. So you have 12 months of that mentorship. So you have plenty of time. And we're still evolving this, even though 6 years later, we're still building that out and making it better. And I think a lot of the companies that have come through this program have become stronger because they've been involved in this program. Similarly, we're doing something similar with the Royal Academy of Engineers, with their 10 or 12 cohorts that they have in 2026 this year. And similarly, some of those have approached the mentors and the sounding board to find out if they can help. So I think the leadership within those two disciplines that have been set up is very good. I think we probably need more of that, like matchmaking in universities, together with startups, together with SMEs, in order to really help those connect and get the best out of the local SMEs that are here in the region, and help them build out for the future as well. So I would use the same discipline in a startup as I would use in an SME.
How would you advise either kind of the entrepreneur or the mentor? You're dealing with entrepreneurs frequently with quite alpha personality types. If somebody's going to be chief exec, raise capital, build a business, you want them to be stubborn, cantankerous, high drive person. that can quite often cause friction because those people don't want to be told. And I guess there's whether you're an investor, whether you're a non-exec, there is a very kind of subtle art of not clashing with them. So sometimes you've got to tell them to get back in the box because you know better. Other times you've got to give them the space to be a little bit wild. What's your approach to dealing with that sort of conflict of saying, actually, you don't know what you're on about. You're going to cock this up. No, stop.
Yeah, some of the founders, I mean, that's a great question. Some of the founders come from academia. Some come from their spin-outs. Some are spin-ins, which come to a university or institute because they need the space or they need the help to build them on or to develop them and to grow to that next level. The founder themselves have to recognize what they're good at and what they're bad at. Maybe they're good as an academic and maybe they're no good as CEO running the business. And I have an example from 3 years ago whereby which we brought a founder through. He recognized very early on that he wasn't going to be the CEO of this business. And he stepped aside, even though he was only 10% academic, 90% in the business.
Wow.
And he stepped aside, and that was a very brave decision to do. And he is now successful. They've now established a successful business, got funding, and he brought in a very successful female CEO, and they've gone on now to doing great things. And they will be a great technology business and a great company in the future. But that's an example of a founder who recognizes very early on that that's not their forte. Their forte was tech and not CEO or leading the business.
And that's keeping your own ego in check. That's a very brave thing to do, to say, look, I'm not the right person to run this, and I'm gonna bring somebody else in to do the commercial bit.
Correct. That's correct.
So anyone going into the Future Club or anyone looking for a good incubator, a good accelerator program, what advice would you give to them? Is how do you find a good fit for a community or an initiative that will help you?
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have a number of programs starting and running here in the northwest of the UK, and there's a number of them running all around the UK. I think my advice would be use the network effectively. We also have here in the northwest the Breakfast Club once a month. It's really good networking, roughly 150 in a room. You can also do that hybrid online. I do that every second month, roughly, or every third month. You get to meet lots of new people, lots of people that are interested in developing businesses, building businesses, and that want to help. You don't always have to pay for the help either. So that's very good to get those type of things. I'd also encourage them to visit and go to many of the funding network meetings that are happening.
Okay.
We're just establishing, as you're aware, Cheshire Angels. We have established 2 angel networks in the last 2 years here in Liverpool. And as you're aware, there's angel groups in Manchester, Manchester Angels, and other funding groups in Manchester with the GMCA as well. So there are now establishing funding groups at this early stage of pre-seed and seed for ideas. And I think I would encourage any founder to start networking in those circles. Once you get known, it's very easy then for somebody to say, oh, I met so-and-so at this meeting. He was really good. We've got to watch this person or something like that. It's very interesting how people talk about each other. They like to talk about success, not so much failure, but they like to talk about success stories. And I think, funders like to be involved in good successes that are happening in the region as well.
You do a lot of work. You've mentioned kind of Cheshire. You do a lot of work with devolved governments. You do a lot of work with government agencies. What are you talking to them about right now? How are you advising them to look at the changing marketplace and how they make full advantage of those devolved powers to create a more fertile ground for attracting inward investments and for seeding these companies? So Cheshire, for example, with the Angels Network you've built, do you start sector specific, or is it sort of sector agnostic? What would you be saying to a combined authority mayor what you need to do?
Yeah, Cheshire and Warrington is just starting its growth hub from the devolved group we're just there now, and we'll be having our second.
This is Philip.
This is Dave,
Right.
Dave and Paul, and I'm just helping them a little bit with a little bit with the locations, with finding some startups. We also have 2 sponsors for that already, which is really good, and they're doing a really good job. And I'm just helping in the background, but I'm also helping a lot with identifying who the angels are in this region and finding some high net worth individuals that we can work with. I would. I'm passionate about maybe getting more local government, local groups and devolved authorities involved in innovating, and also in some of these startups that will become the future businesses of the region. I think we've got to nurture them. We've got to maybe start small. Don't go for 20 or 30. Just go for the handful or 2 handfuls and bring those along. Bring the funding along as well that's needed, the match funding, and maybe make it 3-way. Work with Innovate, work with the local combined authority, and what will happen is that private equity venture capital will come in to start with, and then later, as those businesses grow and develop into SMEs, private equity will come in.
Are the banks a gateway to PE?
Sorry?
Are banks a gateway to PE? Do they bring the private equity?
Yes, so I've done a lot of work with the British Business Bank, and that's a very good established banking network for small businesses starting. As you're probably aware, British Business Bank also front Pre-Seed, which has been run through the venture capital groups here in the north. And that's starting to furnish some businesses with funding, early stage funding, relatively small amount still, 200,000, but it's establishing itself, and it's bringing businesses through. I think the hard bit is getting it. Once you get your seed, is getting that Series A. I still think that's a challenge here, and most companies in the Northwest still have to go outside for Series A, Series B, and Series C, because that Death Valley is the one that traps a lot of the small startups.
How do you go about enlisting those angels? What gets them interested? How do you get a kind of high net worth individual or an angel investor excited and saying, "Yeah, I want to do something in place"?
I think they generally want to help businesses. Some of them want to be distant from the business. They don't want to put their time into it. They just want to invest through either the SEIS or the EIS schemes. Some want to, and that, by the way, they're very good schemes, by the way, in the UK. I think that's really good that the government have maintained those until 2035, I believe. And I think it's good also that they've increased the SCIS to 250. I think that's important because that gives some security for the angel investors that are coming in. In the north here, a lot of angels just club together to put that in place. I've been familiar with a lot of the venture groups throughout the UK that have done that in the past, and I've funded some businesses through those. So I think some angel groups or some angels want to get involved in the business personally, especially if they put a good chunk of money in and they want to give their skill and time if they have available time. Some just want to give the funds.
Where do you see us in 5-10 years' time on the materials front and on kind of the materials deep tech side? What do you think is achievable with everything that's going on in the world and kind of our current constraints? Should we be optimistic? Should we be ambitious? Or
I think in the Northwest we've got a great technology base here and science base for materials. I think it's very strong. It was one of the projects we identified during COVID to start looking at materials and materials technology and the wider area of materials across the Northwest. If you look at the Royce, if you look at the University of Manchester, if you look at Liverpool, even if you look up into Lancashire and look across to Leeds, the north here has a depth and breadth of material science and technology businesses. Disciplines and science businesses that need supporting. A lot of those businesses will need the R doing. So I would encourage any of the institute and universities to start looking outwards. A lot of them link through here through Daresbury, but I would encourage them to link in their own region, in their own area, in Liverpool, in Cheshire, in Manchester, and across into Leeds and Sheffield. It gives them the ability then to link with companies, to help companies. I think hopefully I'd love to see some homegrown material businesses in the next 5 to 10 years here in the Northwest. I'd love also to see some inward investment, foreign direct investment coming into the region. I think I would encourage that. Where I come from in Ireland, that's been the backbone of the Irish economy for the last 20, 30 years.
This has been sovereign wealth funds or private offices, family offices. Where's the inward investment come from?
So mostly the United States. In order to come into Europe, a lot of US companies have established their base in Ireland.
So it's been international corporates, the investments
Correct.
followed through them.
So there's two groups in Ireland. There's Enterprise Ireland and IDA. And they have encouraged, let's say, the inward investment to come into the country. That's precipitated smaller businesses, SMEs, to start growing and servicing those businesses. So for every, let's say, 500 jobs is created, there's another 200 jobs in the economy that service that business. So just to give you the ratio, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's 700 jobs that's being created effectively by foreign direct investment. And there's hundreds now of businesses like that across the country. And that's precipitated also homegrown businesses, startups in Ireland as well. So I'm a little bit involved in the TU Dublin and a little bit with Trinity as well, looking at their portfolio of startups and businesses that are growing and coming out. And that's started to bring in venture capital money and equity money together with government money. And I was involved in one or two startups in Ireland a few years ago there as well. So that type of model is really interesting. There's no reason why you cannot combine homegrown talent with foreign direct investment and build a really good ecosystem here in the north and the northwest. And finally, we got the space. We were talking earlier about Liverpool, from the Everton Stadium right down to the city. It's about one mile, and there's buildings each side of both on the riverside and also into the Pall Mall space. If you drive along there, there's hundreds of buildings, literally.
Plus all the industrial estates we've got,
derelict.
Brownfield sites.
Yeah, there's brownfield sites. Now, part of that will be flats, but I hope some of it will be converted into smaller businesses and technology businesses and businesses of the future that'll grow and develop.
Who are obviously you sit on a number of boards. What are the names, the ones to watch? Whether it's big materials companies or whether it's startups, who are the ones to watch, do you think?
That's good. That's interesting. I wish I had a crystal ball. I'd be investing more in them. I think the companies to watch are the companies that are very flexible in their approach to development and not afraid of change and management, etc. If I was to learn anything from the United States and the way that companies grew and evolved there in the last 20, 30, 40 years where I've been working, they all adapted to change quickly, fast, and then moved on and built out their businesses accordingly. I feel that the AI space is still evolving and going to evolve, but it's going to have a huge influence on the STEM side of things.
That's where the real opportunity is for me. There's going to be a lot of people that go bump from the AI space.
Correct.
There's a lot of people just repackaging the agents, the chat GPTs and the Claudes of the world, but that actual hardcore industrial application.
Correct. Yeah. I think there's massive opportunities for where digital meets material and where AI meets digital.
So material discovery, process improvement, monitoring, filtration.
Correct. I mean, I have been lucky enough to be involved in some of that with my filtration businesses and looking at monitoring and even smart materials of the future. That's where it's really interesting. Okay. I'm involved in one or two startups in the energy space. I think that's where there's going to be a really interesting shift in the next 10 years. So we're going electrical. We're going to go down that route. We're moving. In the last 100 years, 120 years, we've depended upon the combustion engine for everything. Everything from generators through to cars, through to mobility, through to transportation systems around the world, ships, etc., planes, etc. That shift is going to be a huge transition and is happening very quickly. And I think we're still at the part evolution stage of that with materials, with the material application, and with the way it's going to be approached, this way it's going to be introduced, I think, into electrical and energy systems of the future. So I have one or two startups in that space that are just in the emerging, one in the Netherlands, one in the UK, whereby which we're developing the next generation of electrical technology that's going to revolutionize that market.
How do we make sure we don't make the mistake that Europe and the US made with solar and with batteries? So majority of China is a renewables powerhouse because they've invested in solar, they invested in battery technology. A lot of the fundamental R&D was done in Western universities at the time. We kind of let that one just slip. We worried about subsidy control under EU regulations. We worried about state aid. What's the opportunity in materials? What is it recycling of those batteries and repurposing of dead sort of PV cells, or is there a new thing that you think we could really kind of monopolize and make sure that we make the stuff as well as doing the R&D?
Well, I think there's a few parts to that. Manchester is still developing and still evolving how to manufacture graphene at scale. And there's a few companies now emerging after 20 years. It takes a long time when a new technology is developed, actually. And that's pretty quick, actually. 20 years is pretty fast to develop a brand new material, a brand new bit of science that was never even seen before, never even invented before, to take that and to evolve it. And the institutes in Manchester are doing great work in order to build that out. That's one aspect I think that might have a massive influence on the energy space going forward. And I'm fortunate enough to be connected through the materials, through my board work there with Manchester and the materials discipline. I think electronics is another area, and I think medtech is another big area for this in the future. So I think there, as I mentioned earlier, there's good disciplines here in the Northwest, and there's good tech in the Northwest, and good establishing areas. I think the application of the tech is the most important. You can manufacture the original product perhaps in one location, and I've done that in my career in filtration and filter companies and solutions. But you can apply the tech in another location and build a very successful, almost B2C business or B2B business in another location. And that, I think, is where still the opportunity lies for a lot of the emerging technologies that are coming out here in the Northwest. And that's why I said materials is still very strong here and can be developed and evolved into these new application areas and sectors.
So promising future.
I think so.
Richard Lydon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to be with you.